Hey, good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Well,
Good.
thank you.
Good to see everyone. Today is August 16th, 2021. It's the Waunakee Community School District Board of Education, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Ad Hoc Committee. First thing we're going to do is call the order. I'm going to do the roll call. When you hear your name, please say here or I. Michelle Berg. Dave Boucher. Here. Michael Brandt.
Here.
Yeah. Audrey Deppin. Sam Kaufman. Joel Lewis, I'm here. Melanie Meister.
Here.
Monique Mobley.
Present.
Isabella Moore. Laura Ostrander. Regina Pagel.
Here.
Leslie Petty's here. Mike Pisani. Okay. Tim Shaw. Here. Christina Shuppelman. Diana Rusk. Trace Rusk.
Here.
Nia Bang here. And Allison Bowler.
Here.
Okay.
I'm here too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not call anybody else that's here? No, apologize. Okay, so we're gonna do the approval of the minutes. Everyone saw the minutes from last time?
And here's Mike Pisani.
Okay, Mike's here. Okay, so could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, all opposed? Okay, approval of the minutes is done. So we're going to approve the agenda. Has everyone seen the agenda? Okay, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So
Okay, second.
Tina.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Rebecca, is there any public comments?
I have not received any.
Okay, so there's no public comments. So the first thing we're going to do is discussion and possible actions on interim recommendations to the Waunakee School District Board of Education regarding issues of immediate concern. Under A is the equity audit scorecard. So who's going to head that off? Tim?
So before we get into this, the document, I want to thank Allison for pulling the scorecard document together. This is going to be a big assist to our work. And I don't know if we have everything that we wanted, but Diane and Laura, I know you were planning on a longer meeting, but you had some ideas about how to facilitate kind of our affinity of items. Do you think that's something we want to try tonight, or should we just kind of walk through this and kind of triage this?
I'm not sure that in this amount of time, looking through it, the goal would have been to look over notes section by section and discuss those notes. We
Mhm.
may just run through them as we collected the data. I don't know if you have a different idea.
Well, since the survey did collect some thoughts about recommendations, and so I guess the question will be if there was a way of the survey to sort of rank things based on what people selected as priorities, and then, but I don't know that our original plan, I probably need a moment to kind of regroup and
That's okay.
think about how we would do that, but if we feel like smaller groups are needed to get some more meaning from recommendations, I mean, we could do that, but I don't know how that works in a public meeting
Right.
type of atmosphere.
Do we have, Rebecca, do we have the ability to bring the survey up?
Yes, I do, because Bethany shared it. That's what we
There
said.
you go. Okay, so if we go to, if you click on responses,
You can run it too, like, but I have to.
well, why don't, maybe we should just start from the top of the survey then. And because again, hopefully everybody's had a chance to read the documents that prepared for the meeting. Our goal is to come up with a report for the board. And at some point, we should probably talk about who would want to actually present that report to the board. That identifies some areas that we feel need focus. That's obviously not going to be every criteria. It's probably not going to be 2 criteria. I don't know, but where we will fall in the middle. But I think perhaps one good way to go is to review the survey briefly and see what's popping from each of the groupings. And then we can maybe come back to that. So
everyone, I'm assuming took, did what, 15 responses to the survey?
Mhm.
And what is our number?
We're at like 19.
19.
There's a couple people.
yeah, and we've got
Okay.
4, 8. We're at like 13. So this is pretty much everybody. So in criteria number 1, it was A, that was kind of the top priority. And this was, again, for those that don't have this up, the opportunity exists for all students in our community to access high quality early learning programs. And I think, the issue here is, we have a community-based 4K program. We've seen good participation in it. However, it is the first large-scale instructional level. It's very developmental. I don't know if I feel right calling it instructional level, but it's the first year for many kids, and for many families, it's the first. And so for families that are not as networked in, or may have language or cultural barriers, there are things we do to make sure we're doing outreach, but again, this is the introduction to the years of schooling. It's something you want to do at an extremely high level. And I know our 4K program, really, that's a goal. And I think it's just, how can we are there things we can do as a committee to help support that? So that came up as the top priority.
What is this?
Yep.
What is, are you gonna go over D, like what is D?
Yeah, we're going to go to D next. And so D is, again, this is early learning and readiness section. Our school administers developmental and comprehensive health screenings, including hearing and vision exams, facilitates enrollment in Medicaid and CHIP, and ensures all school-age children are immunized pursuant to state regulations. So those were the 2 that got tabbed in criteria 1. If we go down to criteria 2, again, criteria 1 is the early readiness. Criteria 2 is the rigorous curriculum. It's kind of the high standards academic section. And here we had a lot more traffic on the survey. The leading item was B2, which is curriculum is clearly aligned to college and career readiness standards, addressing the needs of students with different abilities and from diverse backgrounds. So there's different moving parts in that. The next one was D, which is the learning community in our school provides various means to accommodate, scaffold, and enrich instructions for students with diverse needs, such as language-rich instruction, universal design for learning, positive behavior strategies, response to instruction, etc. And again, every criteria in here had some traffic. And if we look, down here, we have a few different pieces. So I think in general, there's not a concern about the ostensible rigor of what our universal curriculum here is in the district. The question is it accessible and well presented for students regardless of background? Or is it only accessible and well presented for students that kind of fit a majority profile? And what can we do to make it more universally accessible, regardless of language, disability, learning style, things like that? Also, we'll notice an interest in having more representation in the curriculum. In the comments. And then work with outside providers or current staff to have more equal representation of students in AP classes, have more regular reporting of student performance to board and or public about how various demographic groups are doing in our schools. Social studies curriculum is mentioned. And again, just making sure that the curriculum is set up for all learners and that the way information is presented is representative of all of everybody's stories. I think that's kind of the caption. I won't be coming back to those. So if we go down to criteria 3, criteria 3 is a section that's on climate, school climate. And so we had a few areas that got more attention here, and the two ones that got the most were E1 and F1. So E1 is our school fosters positive teaching and learning conditions, supporting culturally relevant instruction through professional learning opportunities, focused on cultural competence and understanding implicit bias. And F1 is our school has a policy addressing student safety issues on and off site, such as bullying, bias-related incidents, and violence against marginalized persons or groups. And so those were the two that, rose the highest prominence. The one there with 5 is E2, which is our school has a plan to evaluate the relationship between educator training on cultural competence and implicit bias and student achievement. And then the others were D2, which is educator voice and decision-making, F2, which is policies in place that follow a best practices model regarding discipline, and then C, which is access to services that support their well-being and unique needs. And then if we look down here, we have attention to, I always feel like when I'm walking in front of these, I'm blocking, but I know I'm not. So student service ratios, multiple multi-year PD opportunities for all staff. I think this is the key point beyond just certified, because the way staff development is structured in this district, it is very highly weighted towards licensed staff. And we have a lot of staff who have frequent contact, regular contact in their roles with students who don't receive the same training in the diversity strategies that our teachers might.
However, Kim, I will add that as a paraeducator, I have always, when I've wanted to participate, I have never been told no, and they have paid me for my time.
That's it. So just real quick, and not to slow down much, but we have a staff development day coming up next week, actually. And so all of our teachers, by virtue of their contract, will be there. They will participate in the staff development day. We invite our paraeducators to participate, and if they attend, they are compensated at their hourly rate, but their participation is not built into their work schedule. So they have to choose to come, and they have the option not to come. Whereas for teachers, unless you're sick that day, you will be at the training activity. And again, that's for paras, office professionals, custodial and maintenance, and then our partners, food service and bus. We don't operate our own food service and bus. So there, I think this is kind of where this is getting at. Revisit specific policy, is it updated and shared consistently in all sites? Again, look at the policy, look at decision-making, PD on competence and implicit bias, alluding to kind of feedback from recent graduates, and training for all staff on this over multiple years. And if we go more, this is staff involvement in decision-making. The age of board policies. Board policies were last updated 10 years ago or more, should be updated soon and continually afterwards by the curriculum committee. For example, we rule the use of the word color in policies. And so we actually have a policy committee on the board. And the maturity of our policies is it may be helpful with comprehensive vision for areas D, E, and F. Both parts of E should be priorities. And again, suggestions about delivery models for PD and who can participate. And then, and again, tracking the impact of ideas about belonging and achievement. Both areas of F are priorities. Is that the end of the line?
Mhm.
So lots in this space. This was kind of like the really major area, the criteria 3. Lots of data. If we go down to 4, we have one that really spiked. And 4D is our district works with area higher education programs to identify and recruit aspiring educators from underrepresented populations and for critical areas. So again, this is kind of in the HR space. And so that was the main one. And then all of the other ones had at least one. So this is professional pathways or career ladders. This is equitable distribution of effective educators and school leaders. This is evaluations based on multiple measures. And this is incentives for different types of, I'd say, professional pathways such as national board certification, and then also collective bargaining. And then if we look down here at the criteria here, collaboration with UW-Madison Edgewood, a Future Educators of America group, which is a group, and we have talked about this. How do we recruit BIPOC students and incentivize them to get their degree and return to teach? Leadership pathways that are defined. Ways to recruit talent beyond WCAN sites. So for those who are not familiar, WCAN is an application portal sponsored by the University of Wisconsin system, which not all, but many of our teachers are attend UW system campuses for their pre-service training. And so if you're in Wisconsin and a pre-service teacher, you probably know about WCAN. They probably teach it to you on the campuses. If you're a resident, you know, the Twin Cities, Chicago, Memphis, Phoenix, you might not know WCAN is these. I mean, it's on our HR website, but still. Notes indicated we do not need to do letter D, which is the higher ed. And it's been brought up, we do need to review our hiring policies so we can hire more qualified staff, work with local schools of ed to attract students of color, to student teach in Waunakee, maybe grow your own. Evaluate staff are unbiased and support belonging of diverse teachers and staff. So the retention, once we diversify our staff, how do we retain a diversified staff? To make a more concerted effort to bring in more staff from underrepresented groups. The district works from the pool of candidates who apply. Our students don't all see themselves reflected in the people who work for our schools. Diversity makes us stronger. So really, this was a few different things were here, but the lion's share is all in that recruitment space with some in the retention. If we go down to 5, we have a few different things. And section 5 is for the progress monitoring and accountability for the system. So B gets a lot of attention here. Our school ensures all students graduate college and career ready by implementing programs and practices proven to address barriers to achievement such as SAT, ACT prep, college and career counseling, and complying with state and local policies. C1 is adequate resources and funding from the district to provide educator training on the use of data to improve instruction and assessment. D3, our school works closely with families, students, and support networks to ensure the success of students who are at risk for academic failure. And then we have one on low-performing schools, provide additional supports and funding to students such as needs assessment, on-site evaluations. And then in the comments, reach out to families, culturally responsive family engagement strategies. We provide a free ACT preparation test taking tips class to all of our student body during normal school hours, since we're requiring all students to take the test during school hours. So many colleges these days are providing student aid merit scholarships. Many tips and tricks to score higher. Additionally, all students need to be aware they can take the test multiple times to boost or super score their scores. And I think our district take the second time, but cannot afford the $50 fee. Additionally, we need to ensure that all students who want to take the AP classes are and offer scholarships as well for their AP test costs. And then for 5B, work with outside providers or internal providers for more opportunities to be more natural representations of kids in AP classes. So those are the comments. Just very quickly, super score is the concept that if you take the ACT, so the ACT has different subject tests. The idea is if you take the ACT 3 times, a super score is when you take your highest score for any of the subject tests across the whole set of 3, and you basically create an all-star team of your scores, and that's your super score. It's your best score in the different components of all of the exams that you took. On to 4. 6. The transposition of the Roman I. So 6 was the family engagement. And again, we have a little more traffic here. The leading one is B1. Our school has a full-time community liaison. We also have traffic in D. Our schools require all educators and administrators to participate in professional development, focusing on family and student engagement and community engagement, with input from higher ed and community stakeholders as part of licensure programs and professional learning. So a lot of moving parts in there, Laura.
Just a note, this question only allows one option to be selected. So.
Sorry about that. I
No,
fixed
and
it
that's
later.
okay.
So-
I'm still grabs data, but we each got one vote on this question as opposed to multiple.
We probably would have had a lot more bars here. If we had multiple.
Yes.
After about 7 people responded, I did change it. So some people had the
Got it.
opportunity
Okay,
but not
to
everybody.
do more, but
Okay.
yeah,
That's all, just an
Yeah.
awareness. Yeah.
thank you.
For B2, this is the school empowers family members and caregivers to access and utilize school materials and information in context, including providing information in multiple formats and languages. And then 1 each for accommodating family schedules and home visits, and submits data to our district annually on family and community engagement. So this is a low area, but the priorities were really on the liaison and the PD. All schools need up their family engagement game. Topic of family engagement ideas as part of required PD. Do we need to hire a full-time liaison? Not sure. A2 seems to only happen in 4K. We should do it at all levels. B1 seems haphazard and only done as an as-needed basis instead of a year-round assignment. Teacher and staff training is paramount. Liaison both to support the community and to support staff. Community liaison position. The essence of A1, B2 is that our district should be working to engage and empower all families. I don't think we're there yet. The way things have always been seems to be a go-to model, Whose schedule do we accommodate? Who is being left out? Why? Gather more data. We can go down to 7. This is again, the funding. So this was a little more muted, but B and D were the 2 leaders. B is adjusting funding for diverse student needs. D is staff engagement, both educators and administrators in budget development engagement. C2 is state and district funding programs and their incentives. C1, access to an up-to-date school budget. And A1 is our district guarantees funding and makes adjustments for level, size, and location. And down here, staffing decisions should be consistently reassessed. May require staff to change buildings as populations change. Develop criteria for what it means to be innovative. How can staff be recognized if they are innovative? Continue to engage staff and community in budgeting and allow for representation of various voices. Little evidence that Board of Education members even have the ability to participate in meaningful aspects related to budgeting. In short, administration controls budgeting, the board approves it. If the board does not have a meaningful impact on budget, it is doubtful that staff truly does either. If there was one factor, I would say incentives. I would say incentivize level assessment practices during summer months. Reviews, departments can close the loop. It sounds like this is done to some degree in the PLC. This would support that work. Many good methodologies to identify student learning that is occurring in both the content area and other learning domains. This is learning that cannot be measured with standardized tools. Not exactly a whole lot of equity between elementary buildings in particular. Should determine how to improve that. For example, an assistant principal or arboretum. Worth noting that another facilities referendum will greatly improve these issues with Heritage and middle school. So that, we're at the half-hour mark, and I know we want to be at 7:30. That's kind of a real quick glimpse at what the survey highlighted. And Bethany, thank you for doing that because I really think it was a nice book for this. Allison.
Tim, I don't know if it helps, but as you were going through that, I used the scorecard and just highlighted, it seemed like there's 2 that rose to the top within each criteria. So I just highlighted it and wrote next to it, just so that we know what was rising to the top. And not saying that that is what needs to be.
So you have that out.
Yep, I put it on, like I commented to highlight it on the scorecard piece, just so that we have some record of what we're. So again, not sure if that's will help with those next steps, but.
Well, I mean, I think that's important because wasn't that the whole point for us taking the survey to see what rose to the top?
Right.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't have discussions, but since it seems like everyone, voted and they felt comfortable with that, does anybody think differently about their decisions, if they made any decisions? So how about this? Why don't we go from criteria 1 all the way to 7, and why don't you say the 2 that came up?
Okay. I don't know, it should be displayed up there.
Do you have it in the Google Drive?
Yep, it's the scorecard of equity audit. Or if you just search scorecard, it probably will.
As I mentioned earlier, I have Google Chat.
So go up, search and drive, and just type in,
Scorecard of WCSD equity audit.
there it is.
And so as Tim was going through the Google, like the form results, I just highlighted what were like the 2, there's one that,
And so by highlighting, it's these ones, it's the yellow, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
then if it's also helpful, I kept note of how many, the number that goes with each. So for the first one, it was 7 votes, and for the second one, it's
it was out of 15 total, right?
Yeah.
We want to pause and make sure everybody online is
Okay, so everyone online, so what we're gonna do now is there is two choices from each criteria that was highlighted. And we're going to kind of focus on those, because I'm assuming we had 15 people who took the survey. So we're gonna look at that as the areas that we're gonna make, I'm assuming, the recommendations about. But my question before, if what I was saying, if you didn't hear me, was, do you think that you've changed your mind at all since you took the survey? Or are you pretty secure with what you put down? Good, Melanie? Awesome. Mike, you're good too? Okay, awesome. So let's just proceed with that then.
Well, I'm thinking, Joel, maybe the one thing we should be considering is why are we going through these? What is the end result? I mean, I'm assuming this is to pick, what are we going to present to the board, right? So as we look at these, you're looking at what should the board focus on out of this report? Does that mean we tie it to a recommendation? Or do we just say this is a problem area that needs to be looked at?
You know, I guess my question is that there's, like you said, there's other areas too that are important, right? It's not like we're saying this one, but forget everyone else. So I guess, since you're on the board, what would you suggest in terms of keeping it open, like recommending, but keeping it open so we can also focus on other areas?
I'm thinking that the final end goal is being designed next week, right? So this is going to be an element of what's put out next week. Next week, you're going to add those other categories.
Okay.
Like, for example, reading through it, I really didn't see a clear definition of curriculum. Yet that was one of the major charges in the original write-up of the committee. So when you get through this, I think the idea is to pick some, and it doesn't have to be two from every category. It might just be one. You might even skip a couple saying, you know what, that doesn't rise to the important level of some other stuff. But out of this, which ones are important enough that you want to mention to the board? And I always think it's very important that any group anywhere, if you bring up an issue, at least give a direction for where the next step can be. Not just say, we have a problem with board policies around DEI. Great. We have a problem with board policies about wording, just in general, and the age of them. But I think it's part of it is when you pick, try to find things that you can give something constructive to do, so that it doesn't just get dropped because nobody knows where to go next.
And I would also suggest that, oh, I'm so sorry.
I was gonna just do a clarifying. So what I hear you saying is pick high impact areas and possible action steps that might support those high impact areas.
Or at least where to, and maybe not even necessarily a fix, but where to go next. It may be you've got to go get something. That's fine. But I just think it's going to be important that there be something concrete to go beyond just this looks like a problem. That's all.
I would also suggest that there are some things that might go together with one recommendation, like this first one, the opportunity exists for all students in the community to have access to the high quality early learning programs. When we talked about that, part of the issue was, do all of the families know how to access that, and are we aware of what barriers might be in place, which might be addressed in criteria 6 about having a community liaison or improving our communication, which also might help with the ACT stuff. So it seems like there might be some things that tie together where one recommendation might cover a number of criteria.
So I guess this is just a question for Tim. So like when there is something that comes up where it says you want a community liaison, obviously I think about money, right? Because obviously that would be a position that have to be paid for. Like what's the likelihood of that actually happening? To have a dedicated position of a community liaison?
So what I would observe is that the current fiscal environment for the next 2 years at the state level is very tight. In some districts, that's being offset by more access to federal aid with the pandemic. the composition of our district doesn't qualify us for as much federal aid as most districts in Wisconsin. So our overall environment is tight. Now, the community passed a referendum last fall. That having been said, this is one position in a budget that's north of $40 million. And I don't want to minimize the offsetting choices the Board of Education and district leadership might need to make. But if it's a priority and it's one position, it can get done. So, I mean, that's my perspective. Dave, you're on the board.
Oh.
And I'm not asking you to take a position, but I mean, just kind of the way I kind of portrayed the landscape.
I mean, it was, just looking at the last budget, maybe a good example, the communications position. Randy was asking for a half position. The board turned around and said, no, full. And doubled the funding in effect. Because they felt it was important that if you're gonna do it, half a position, you're not gonna get as many calls, I can't, whatever. But they are willing to, you know, they're funding extra positions. Problem is, there's a lot of demand for extra positions, just due to student growth. So to say that this position would be funded is, you know, up in the air. But to say that it's an important need may cause refocus of existing positions. To say maybe that's where we need to go as a way to further what's being asked for. So I think it's multiple possible answers, but if you say that there's a need for that and show that, there may be different ways of dealing with it.
Because I think about community liaison, we have to be very specific what that means, right? So obviously engaging with the community, but what, you know, so maybe what we should figure out is what that might look like if we're going to use it as a recommendation of a community liaison position.
And I would just say in passing that, you know, our focus, you know, we've worn kind of the equity lens in our work. And because we were working from a prepared resource, it envisions a full-time position. The year before the pandemic, we facilitated a set of conversations, school by school. We invited parents in for a forum around communication and engagement. And so we conducted 6 of those. And I think I attended 5 of the 6. And we prepared a report. And it had a few different pieces. And I think that helped shape, you know, some of the requests for the communication position, but an idea that also came up in there. This is a broader discussion around family engagement, was designating a family liaison, maybe even on a volunteer basis at each school. So like if I'm a new parent at the intermediate school, who's a parent that is designated as the communicator between families and the school? So if I'm new, you know, point me in the right direction. And I'm not saying that's a better model than this model,
Well,
but
and I don't think it suggests a model. That was one component,
Right.
and we picked that. I mean, collectively, we picked that. It did not say to do that. It said do all of these things about engagement. So I just want to interject that I'm concerned about time, and if we decided we're going to start at the top, I think we need to dive in there. But I do agree that I think it's important that we pick priorities and then start to propose some kind of action. I think that's what the purpose of the survey was.
Could we potentially, as we're going through this, pick the top 2 priorities that she's done? Think about and just jot down what an action step might be on the side quickly without a ton of dialogue, and then go down and see how those connect together. Like you're saying, some of them might overlap. But again, you said,
Well, I mean, I think we've already, maybe not everyone suggested action steps, but we just read through what a lot of those are. And I think we start with that rather than starting back from scratch.
totally agree.
So we're just going to read the 2 right? Two top
But, or
drawers.
just putting this on the table too, like it's the priority, the second one, D only had 2 people, like even though that was like the top 2 for that section, that was only 2. And I know going down, there's some that had
Mhm.
7. So
Yeah.
it's like, do we want to just like make a decision, like,
I mean, to make it easier, so we just kind of get through this too, because I think we
Right.
could get caught up. Let's just do majority.
yeah.
So
that's
unless
what I-
it's close, which I know some of them, there was one that was 5 and 5. Let's
Yeah,
just do
so should I
majority.
take
Yeah,
it
just
off
take
of
it.
this one?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
That's
but I don't even think it has to be within this one, right? So we know that one in this category has 7, so we put a pin in that and
Yep.
see if all the other 10s rise above that.
So that's what I'm saying, the
Yeah.
second one I'll take off, I'll
Yeah.
remove it.
I mean, something that I think could easily be done is, because this is already in board book, all of our key documents could be transmitted to the board. We identify our top 2 per area with the highlights in this document, but then as a committee, we're going to choose the focus areas from within this group. I mean, highlighting doesn't mean we have to subtract more detailed information further down. There may be other things in here the board may find of value in addition to the recommendations. That's all I'm saying.
So perhaps just leave it
So
and
keep it
like
highlighted.
star the ones that,
I
I like-
noticed
I
that
like
there are 10 that got 5 or more.
Mhm.
So that was like a third of the people who
Mhm.
took the survey, voted for that or more. So, maybe we just want to have a criteria like
Look at the
that.
top 10.
Yeah.
No, not everybody has a computer here. It would be helpful if that document was accessible to us all. Right now, it's locked. So I can't go in and scroll. And for those at home, it might be helpful to be able to scroll through.
the form. Is that what you mean?
And the only other thing I would say is that maybe we could have some structure. One thing we had just talked about was sort of framing things around a SMART goal of what is simple questions of what are we trying to accomplish? So if we pick one, if we can at least answer the question, what are we trying to accomplish when prioritizing this particular issue, then maybe we can get into a direction to fill out more of this document and recommendations.
The if then
Yeah,
scenario.
if we
do
did this,
then
then
this can happen.
what could happen? And
Or
I would suspect that there's gonna be related things that maybe didn't float to the top, but they might be intermediate things that you kind of have to address in order to get the end that we see.
Rebecca, would it make sense to put the form, the purple icon, just save it into our shared folder and then everyone would automatically have access
It is shared, it is
in the folder? Okay.
it's in the drive.
So why don't we keep rolling through the
Yeah, let's
scorecard
keep
and look at the highlights, and then as was mentioned, there are only 10 that have 5 or more. That could be a top 10 list. And
So I'm just trying to, so once we determine, right, so D is the one that's highlighted, right? Which one, they're both, but whatever one has more.
Yeah.
So we're not debating that, are we? Because I mean, that's already decided, so we don't need to go over that again. So then, what are we gonna do after that? Are we gonna say why that we chose that?
Well, I don't think that is an action necessarily. I mean, so it says the opportunity exists for all students in our community to access high-quality early learning programs. So I think we have to
what's the
Well,
design
say,
outcome?
what does that
What does that mean, right?
mean,
Like,
and what are we asking that?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, that's what I mean, like,
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
explain that, because what does that
Right.
mean, high quality learning?
And to save us our time then too, like back as we've been going through this audit, the discussion notes have any
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
questions. So
Yeah.
if it's an actual report or whoever's reporting to the board, I feel like we have all this information. It's
That's
just
for the-
putting
yeah.
it together,
that's for the writing team and the slide deck team to work from.
right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying to save our time so that we can work through this.
So is step 1 just reviewing those top
Yeah.
priorities?
So were we planning on putting on an order thing? like, okay, so we have 1A as a priority, but is that priority over 3B? Wasn't are we just, I think at one point I was understanding we are gonna come up with a lit, well, I don't know. So that's the question is, are we just recommending that, or are we saying we're gonna put it in priority, what we've seen here in an order or not?
So what I
Does
thought
that make
was,
sense?
we're just going by the majority, right? So the number that was put there, that's the one we're gonna go by. Since that was picked.
But I'm saying, but within the criteria, so we can say, does this criteria 1A, is that as important of a focus versus criteria 3, E that we picked? Are we prioritizing the criteria as well? Or we just?
Within, you mean? So like, here's your top 10 and number 1 is our most
Right.
urgent.
Here's my wondering, so beyond the work of this team, because we're still an ad hoc. What I know we're charged with right now is completing the audit and completing a report. And if we don't know where our direction is as a team following this, if we were to have handed this work over to a different stakeholder team that was to take over this work, if I'm that team, I want all of the data and I want to look through all the trends in that stakeholder team with, like an evolved team that may take over the work. I'd rather have them have access and figure out those priority areas than us. So I would rather take this information, type it into a report, provide the data and say, go take it, run with it. If we don't have an idea of how this team is to continue. Not that the work won't continue, but whoever's gonna take this work forward should be the decision makers on how to prioritize. My take.
So, what would you want us to do now though? Like, so what do you want to, what do you want us to come out with right now? So if we
I
have
think the
to,
next step is to come up with a writing team. And really just, we talked through this whole entire survey.
Yeah.
These are the ratings here, kind of like, here's an overview, highlights, here are the areas for growth. And then people then, sort through that data from there. I think the data is what tells the story. And I think other eyes on that data to be able to read all those thoughts, put together the trends and patterns, and then make the decisions moving forward based on that data. Because we don't have time to do it in this meeting.
no, we don't.
We could do it in a
Yeah.
writing team, but that would just be a couple people. But if we're just writing a report, we're sharing that report with the board to say, this is all the work we've done, which is tons of thought. And then, take it forward in a meaningful way. And we know it's going to evolve because we're in the very beginning part of this process. We started it and we'll continue to evolve either in this form or another form.
Okay. Mike, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Joel. Was that Laura who was talking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I could tell by I could tell by your voice, but I didn't want to misname you. I just want to kind of second what you said there. And in general, I mean, I'm concerned about the content of what we're producing too, just in that, overall, with whatever we're speaking about, we could make kind of whatever recommendations we can underneath the charge as to what we have right now. And I mean, the overall thrust, at least in terms of what I had envisioned it from the start, was doing things that other committees just had not taken up. So if we're talking about handing off this work to another committee, we do need to give some, just very basic but specific direction as to what we think is necessary to do. I mean, we could make a recommendation that the district needs to hire more people of color in positions of administration and staff. That's something very simple we could do. HR committee has never dealt with that. I don't know why. It's just something that never discussed. We could talk about policies, a bullying reporting system in policy. Policy committee never did it. I was sitting on it for 2 years, never crossed my mind. The purpose of this, I think, is to give some direction for those committees to do something. And if they sit on it, that's the way it goes. You should go out and vote, and then your decision makers can make those decisions. I think the purpose of this committee is to just say some specific, clear things, say, hire this person and move on. We don't need to get too lost in the weeds about how specific to be about it, because that's for the board to get lost in the weeds and spend a 4-hour meeting talking about this stuff. I don't think we need to duplicate that effort. That's all.
Thanks, Mike.
So maybe we continue and we at least see what these top 10 are. And then let's see where that sits. And then with the time left, we could talk about a writing team and next steps. And
Well, we should probably come up with that with the writing team to kind of figure out who wants to do that or who wants to take that on. And then in terms of,
I love writing. I'd be happy to be part of it. I
like
know,
writing with Laura.
okay, you two time. Do we have a third person? Yeah, Laura,
I volunteered last time, but if somebody else.
oh, and I volunteered last time too, so I don't have to, if
Oh,
other people like writing.
No.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I'm happy to help.
So we're gonna need the writing and then we're gonna need the presenting too. So someone feels comfortable presenting. speaking.
I'd do either.
Is that what I'm hearing?
I would be comfortable either helping in writing or presenting. I do have a concern that, I mean, if Diane is joining, then that's a committee or a community person, but I would hate for this committee, which I've never seen a committee be so representative of community and students, and I don't want it to come off as like staff are steering this. So I would just caution, that hasn't been the case, and so I would hate for that to be the perception.
What do you prefer to do? Because I could help with writing or facilitating if you wanted to join with her either way. I'm comfortable doing it. Because you have many gifts. I've seen them. You're great at what you do.
I, timeline wise, within the next week, I prefer to not be involved with the writing project, I guess, if we need people for the presentation part.
Because is the turnaround that the writing will be done by next Monday as like a draft form, ideally?
I personally am uncomfortable with the idea of not having a draft for the committee to, I don't, so much good work has been done. I would hate to have something go to the board without us being able to say the committee as a whole reviews the draft and endorses this.
So-
And that means we need to have a draft for next week.
Well, one thing with that though, because, I mean, we do have other things too that we need to talk about, right? So my only concern with that is that if we bring this to the next meeting, and we go through the whole thing, then the whole meeting is gonna be taken up. So what about we do the draft and then can we post the draft so everyone can read the draft? I mean, we don't necessarily need to talk about it in person. I think right now we're having that communication and we're trusting, obviously, that it'll be done right, and then we look at it.
I have a suggestion that could be time saving. So I want to just sort of give an example of maybe what could be, open to that it might not be. But just based on the notes, I think we probably need some more comments now that people know what sort of the priorities are. Perhaps people could add additional comments. I don't know if there's a way to do that within the current survey or not. Based on just what we had for the survey, what could make a statement such as, if we are, I'm talking about 1A there, if we are to ensure equitable access to high quality early learning, then we should understand who and what families are or are not accessing the learning experiences. Consider what impact lack of access may have on students later in their school experience. Use the information we know about families who do not access early learning experiences to improve outreach to families who are, for example, new to the district, maybe English language learners. That's sort of there's a lot of if then, even within the content we've already collected. And so I'm wondering if we made sure that people were able to put in additional thoughts as a writing team, we might be able to bring that together.
Question.
Yeah,
What were you just reading off of?
the comments from the criteria
So, from
that
the
were
survey
in the survey.
that we already did.
Yeah,
What else do we need in addition? Not this, but what about all the data that we
we
compiled?
could, that would also.
That's
that-
patterns,
Mhm.
trends that support where we landed.
Exactly. So there might be data
Right.
that,
No,
I know
yeah.
Tim has already shared on criteria 1 that we could put in there to supplement. So we
We just
might
It should
already,
all be
know.
in the folders.
right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. If I'm clear.
I think we're tracking together. I just want to make sure that people, feel like between the audit process and the survey that they've put in all the information they felt like they needed to submit.
I do think there could be one last opportunity with just those top 10 listed and really prompt people to think in terms of action, because I think myself included, whenever Tim was skimming, that was me, because I am not a concise writer. But like, if we just really prompt people to focus on what would this look like, what needs to happen, and why, a smidge. I think that would be an opportunity, and not that everyone would have to do it. Maybe people feel like they've already given all of that, but I'm not sure that, you know, there are a lot of people who are not here that are not staff people, and I think we're heavy on the staff here. Of course, everyone's been involved so far, but perhaps there's just one more opportunity for people to.
I mean, I guess as long as it doesn't slow down the writing team too. So, I
Right.
mean, if you guys are okay with
Within the next couple of days, you gotta give.
to
this
get that information, just so people understand that, because if you're waiting for people to respond, now it's holding you guys up from doing that. So, and your time is valuable, so I don't want that to happen.
So basically, you're looking at comments by Tuesday, Wednesday, writing team Thursday, Friday, review over the weekend, and then we talk about it.
Right. How many people feel like they need to add additional comments?
The only thing that I would, I guess, like, once I looked at what the top 10 were, some big trends stood out. Like, we need to make sure that we're communicating effectively to all families, regardless of their background. We need to make sure that all students have access to the rigor. It's not that we don't have the rigor, we need to make sure all students can access it. And we need to make sure that our staff are getting professional development to reach out to diverse populations. So like, once I saw the 10, then I could be like, okay, so here's the broad like headings. So then I could make recommendations. But like when I was taking the survey, I felt like I couldn't necessarily see that as much. So maybe it would help to like say, here are the top 10. What trends are you seeing and what recommendations do you have now that you see here's the results of the data? Would that help?
I think there's two different ways that I think we're talking about traveling. One is, here are all the criteria, here are the areas that stood out. And then another path is that here's the top 10, here's what stand out. One is us prioritizing, one is just giving them the data overall to prioritize. I don't care which way we go, but I mean, it seems like two separate paths that we're talking about perhaps.
So to me, I think many of us have a general idea of what the top 10 are, but I think it'd be good for us to actually go through it and kind of make sure we have that all in common, and so the public can see from this meeting what the top 10 are. And then I think that whole point about are there thematic connections across some of these that then might help surface some bigger noticings?
All right, yeah, I was gonna, yeah, because we have like 30 minutes. So let's just do like the top 10, but we're not discussing the top 10. right?
No, we're just noting, identifying what they are. Make sure I'm-
So can I just say what the ones that got 5 or more responses were?
Yeah, somebody.
But let's go
I was gonna say,
through it criteria by criteria, and then you do that. I think that'd be great.
So the only one in criteria 1 was A.
Mhm.
That got 7 responses.
You just read it so people.
Sure. So the opportunity exists for all students in our community to access high quality early learning programs.
And see, yeah, okay.
Then, yeah, so the 2 that are highlighted were the only 2 in criteria 2. Do you want me to read?
Yeah, if you
Okay,
can.
sure.
yeah.
Curriculum is clearly aligned to college and career-ready standards, addressing the needs of students with different abilities and from diverse backgrounds. And the learning community in our school provides various means to accommodate, scaffold, and enrich instructions for students with diverse needs. So that was criteria 2. Then in criteria 3, I had 3 that got 5 or more responses. The first was E1, our student, and I got 10 responses. Our school fosters positive teaching and learning conditions, supporting culturally relevant instruction through professional learning opportunities, focused on cultural competence and understanding implicit bias. E2 got 5 responses. Our school has a plan to evaluate the relationship between educator training on cultural competence and implicit bias and student achievement. And then F1 got 10 responses. Our school has a policy addressing student safety issues on and off site, such as bullying, bias-related incidents, and violence against marginalized persons or groups. So those,
Can we just quickly grab those things, copy them and paste them into another document so we can see I don't know. One sheet,
Writing something like that.
you know what I'm saying? Copy E1.
Maybe we could do that just after we go through it, so we can
Yeah.
accomplish going through and then we go back and grab.
Yep.
Okay,
Could we maybe clarify that something that got 10 votes might not have necessarily been flourishing? It could be, does not exist. It could be on either end of the spectrum.
Not apparent.
Yeah, or not apparent.
Well, like that last one you just did, you said you had three.
I did, that's what I'm thinking. I don't want people to think, oh, we said all these were great or not so good. It could
Yeah.
be anyone on the spectrum got 5 or more, and as
Yeah.
many as 10.
So then in criteria for D got 9 votes. Our district works with higher education programs to identify and recruit aspiring educators from underrepresented populations and for critical shortage areas.
And that was not apparent, right?
That was not apparent. Then for criteria 5, B got 8 votes. Our school ensures all students graduate college and career ready by implementing programs and practices proven to address barriers to advancement, such as SAT, ACT preparation, college and career counseling, and complying with state and local policies.
And that was a merger.
And then, do you need a whole one? Did you say that?
Nope.
No, there's two more.
And then for criteria 6. So the other ones that were
Yeah.
marked as priority only got 3 votes.
Mhm.
So that's why I didn't
Okay.
bring those
Oh,
ones
okay.
up. And then for criteria 6, B1 got 7 votes. Our school has a full-time community liaison tasked with engaging and representing families, as well as conveying school policies and procedures. And then D got 5 votes. Our schools require all educators and administrators to participate in professional development, focusing on family and community engagement with input from higher education institutions and community stakeholders as part of licensure programs and professional learning.
So for both, it says does not exist, and I think the one on the bottom says it's split between not exist and not apparent.
And emerging.
And emerging.
And then there weren't any in criteria 7 that got more than 3 votes. So the ones that were priorities only had 3 votes.
So they're tied.
Yeah. So they were relative priorities within this criteria, but in comparison to the other criteria items, they didn't get as many votes.
You want to just read that?
Do you want me to read them?
Yeah,
even though they-
again, I just.
only got
public
votes.
here.
Sure. So we got 3 votes. Our district adjusts funding for diverse student needs, allowing for students in schools with the greatest need to receive additional funding. And D got 3 votes. Current educators and administrators in our school have opportunities to meaningfully participate in the development of a sustainable multi-year budget.
Both of those were emerging. Okay, so we have those top 10, right? So, what was the thing that you wanted to?
I'm trying to.
Was that-
Oh, okay.
With every type of- Sorry, I saw it.
So for the writing team, is there anything you need from us that we can, I mean, obviously, there, but is there anything that could help with the process?
for me.
The only thing I worry about are the people that could not attend tonight, because I know I heard at the last meeting, there were some folks that were not, they would have really liked to participate more. So I guess I do feel, I think we could definitely start writing and working and also allow input from those who could not attend tonight to provide additional comments after, they see what came out in terms of those priorities that we're focusing on, because they might have some thoughts that could be helpful.
So could we agree on a deadline for getting any final comments into a particular place that we can take into account when we start writing?
Well,
I mean,
earlier Dave was
I like
suggesting,
it.
Right, is
you
that,
know, comments tomorrow and Wednesday.
yeah,
then we would hustle it and try to get an executive summary
Thursday, Friday.
ready for on Thursday and Friday for the weekend.
Okay.
Does that seem doable to folks?
Can this table be downloaded in I did get in so I could see the results, but can this table be downloaded into a Word format? And then we can actually just remove the rows that we need to remove. Could throw it into a Google Drive, give people the link, because we all have access to this drive, give people a deadline, and they could add additional comments to that document.
Either that, or we just do a Word document with that table, and we just take
Well,
the
if
10.
you keep it in, this is a document, it's not word specific, but this is an editable document.
Yeah.
Then people can see what other people are saying.
Mhm.
Because it's live. So I would recommend.
Because we do want to see that, right? So the information that you get from other people as well is important for the group to see as a whole.
Rebecca, I think what we wanted, and maybe you can do it, or if not, some of us could maybe do it tonight, would be to create the top 10, which would be a Google Doc with a table that would have the top 10. We would just copy over the element, I think the continuum score, emerging, improving, and then have a third column, which would be the count of responses, 5, 7, 9, what have you. That we could all see reduced down to the top 10.
Okay, so then after that's done, the writing team's working on it. What is the next step after that? Obviously,
I mean, I wonder though, you were talking about the things that this audit didn't capture.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel, I don't know how I feel about having this top 10 and then acting like that's the only place that the recommendations can go. I want to be sensitive to the fact that like, we picked this tool because we needed something to guide us. And I think it helped give us some direction, but I don't want it to be confining and exclude ideas that came up in the group. So is there a space when we shared this top 10, is there any, have a thing that says, is there anything that it's not?
so yeah, so for instance, I mean, we still have other stuff on the agenda that
Right.
talks about hiring and so there's other things, David's talking about curriculum. So there's also a lot of stuff that I feel like whoever's going to be the speaker, you want to verbalize that, like telling them that this is just not the end all. This is just what we chose because we had limited time. Hopefully, as we move on or how this committee goes, we can start, focusing on other areas. And then maybe at that point, you could say some other areas that were a big concern was X, Y, and Z, and verbally just
I
say
just
it.
wanted to make sure that people weren't feeling like this wasn't capturing everything. So
Yeah.
next time, there might be time to say what else should be presented.
Because
My suggestion would be when we put it out for comments, Joel,
Yeah.
the next 2 days. I mean, I wouldn't say it's speak now or forever hold your peace, but I think we should encourage folks, if there are things that you want to particularly highlight in the top 10, or things that you think are important points we've discussed in the last 9-10 months that you want in here, a place to add those in. So at least at the writing team, we can see that and think about maybe saying, here's the top 10, here's the reason, here are some other important points that have come up in the discussion.
Because I'm assuming if the board votes on this tool and accepts it, then obviously, first of all, that's a huge step, right? If they take the tool, and then if they say yes, then at that point, that's when, to me, this all comes into play where you focus, right? Because right now we're just giving recommendations and they're either gonna accept it or not accept it. But again, even with this audit tool, even if they did use it, you still have to collect data and you still have to revisit and you still have to, make changes as it comes. So I don't feel like this is just an end all. We're just telling you, for the last 12 to 19 months, this is what we did and that's it, nothing else. But again, I think if we verbally say that, and like, I know what you're saying, Tim. So in terms of putting it, if people need to document, maybe we have them do that, so at least it's on a record, meaning in here. And because I'm assuming all this stuff is going to the board, right? In terms of like the data and,
I would think we can organize it not only in a way with the top 10, but also just sort of seeing the overview of different pieces, like emerging, improving, like you can sort of like lay it out so it tells a story
yeah,
in a couple different ways. I forgot what I was gonna think about. I was gonna say something. I'll come back to it.
so, so I guess at this point, so the writing team, it seems like you said that, we're gonna have what, 2 days, what are the days?
2 days so tomorrow and Wednesday.
Oh, don't blame me.
No, it's
Oh, no,
fine.
No.
Tuesday, no, what
I
you
was
said.
giving you
I was
credit
figuring-
today.
I mean,
Get
We're
it
already
done by
through Monday.
Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, I
So
forgot it's
people
Monday,
are
so
gonna-
Tuesday, Wednesday.
We're gonna
Yeah,
have basically
Thursday, Friday, writing.
Tuesday, Wednesday,
Thursday, Friday.
comment, Thursday, Friday, right? Over the weekend, people can look at it, review it, so that on Monday is your final look at it, plus adding in the other recommendations.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that should then be able to create your slide deck.
The other thing I was gonna say is, I think we had a conversation and we were in the process that we had created, we were trying to figure out those other existing categories. In some way, they likely fall into these categories. And so if we have something about wondering how it fits in, need to place, areas to consider, where do they fit into the larger plan? Because we don't need to create other avenues. These are the big rocks per se. We want to see where they fit within that structure. And so that doesn't have to be our work, but we don't want to lose them. So we just name it in, where do we place it? Where might it live?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm making the top 10 up scorecard of the scorecard. So that'll be done. for you.
okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay. Are we all good with the timetable?
So
Yes?
just to clarify, where exactly are we commenting? Like, is there gonna be a place out there? to
Yep,
comment?
so I have a
Okay.
column that has like the element, a column that has like how we place it, a column that has like the number of votes, and then an open for any additional comments.
Yeah.
So I will do this share with Rebecca, and then if Rebecca shares it out and just ask for any feedback, you don't have to, but any feedback by Thursday.
Are you keeping the comments that are already there?
Yeah, this is just a separate, yep.
Did you put in there the,
Well, no, it will not have the comments that are there unless that's,
You go
I think
with
that's a
that.
good suggestion.
look at the other documents or
Right, yeah.
Do you want to put a link to that? document?
No one else, I don't know that it.
We can
Is
play
there-
with
The
that later.
responses on.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay.
do you have an other considerations category in there?
Yeah,
Perfect.
I can add it. at
That'd
the
be
bottom.
awesome, because that's where people can drop in those ideas that sort of we need to file somehow,
Okay.
or whatever.
Can I move on? All right, so the next thing, it's under future meetings, is discussion of recommendations to the district to further equity for other issues, including building accessibility, audits of accessibility for websites, discussion of district progress on the removal of Native American imagery. So,
Did we skip
You have
recommendations
B and
on?
C.
the-
oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
I mean, although that's almost more a Tim thing in a weird way. So is there more input you want?
Oh, right.
So, yeah.
So,
Well,
we wanna,
Yeah, so we met today on the tool. I came in and I spoke to them, and we basically took the recommendations from the board, from the group, and we added it to the document, and then we're gonna do a final draft of that document based on that. Really what the whole thing with this reporting tool, the goal is to get it in place when school starts, but the same thing with that is that it can be tweaked again, because obviously we're putting suggestions in. We were, what Izzy was saying before about making it understandable for each grade level. And I think what we were going to do is actually give it to staff to be able to, right?
Mhm.
To be able to do that for those grade levels. So then this way, you know, everyone can understand that. So even if you have a community member who has a low comprehension level, right? But obviously if it's a grade level thing, they might be able to understand it better. So
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, one thought I had is I would output the survey document that we have into something editable. I would share it with the folks on this committee that are currently working at the elementary level, of which we have 5. And I know this is a busy time. We've got a lot of other things going on. So you have a right to pass. We've got lots of people who I think we could go to, but they might not be as familiar with it. And so give people who work most frequently with our younger students the opportunity to make the language more developmentally appropriate.
So it's just about the wording. So just go through and it looks like the word's
Oh,
too
that
big for a
easy.
3rd grader.
It's
That's
not that easy.
No, I have kids. I know. But what I'm just saying, I didn't mean to simplify it that, but I'm just saying like, just so, you know, as we look through it, everybody can understand it. And nobody's, you know, we're not forcing anybody to do it. If you feel comfortable doing so, then take on that task. All right. Anything else with that tool? No, that's it. Okay, so C, shared language glossary of terms. Who was, Leslie was on that team.
We're working on getting a date to meet about it.
Okay.
You know, I think on this one, this is where you put up a slide in front of the board saying, look, there are some terms that are really misunderstood and people don't know what it means. Equality and equity. What's the difference? Why do you use one? What does it mean? Inclusion, what does that mean? This is not something you're going to draft in a week. You know, this
I've
is something
started
that's
it.
going to take a long time.
Yeah.
And it's a reason for
She
this
started it.
committee to keep working on.
Yes.
But we tell the board, this is something we need.
Correct.
And I think that's the recommendation. I mean, I was scared last week at a other meeting to hear that the word equity means anytime the word equity is used, that's critical race theory. And therefore, that's the school trying to implement critical race theory. And it's like,
I mean, I think
How-
the importance of it coming from this group is we're operating under pretty much shared understanding of some of these ideas.
Right.
And so it's just clarifying the perspective that we're coming from so that our work can be seen through that lens rather than.
and it's
invented
important for
outside lens.
parents in the community to know when we say equity, what does that mean?
Yes.
And not let someone else define what equity is.
Well, when we had
And the board needs to
the
do
public
that.
discussion, right? We spoke about that. So just kind of educate, like you said, just educate people. And especially coming from us as an ad hoc committee. So you're still working on that, right?
Yeah, I also think that we do have a pretty liberal lens sitting on this group. And I think I want to better understand the fears and concerns that come up when you hear terms like CRT, because it can't be dismissed. We have to understand sort of what those fears are so that we can build that common definition together, because handing a glossary of terms over to a group of people to see and understand it isn't a partnership. And so how do we, begin dialogue with groups of people to come to that common understanding together?
I think
Is a piece of what I'm wondering.
as I saw the project, it was, we're defining it through our work and proposing it to the district to have as a
Sure.
shared understanding.
Yeah.
I think the next opportunity to really have community dialogue will be that community engagement session in September. So I think we do need to have something that comes from this group that represents where we're coming from. Like now. So,
So I think it's going to be hard to come up with a definition. in 2 weeks.
I think there are lots of that already exist that are not that.
I guess what I want to articulate is we can come up with a glossary of terms and we can come up with recommendations, but we have to move along as a community together. And so we have to find a representative space and room to do that, to grow together. Because no matter how many definitions we put out, until we're sitting and having dialogue to discuss what that looks like in schools, that trust and that transparency doesn't feel like it's there until we're engaging in the dialogue and the work together.
Well, that's why there were conservative people who were appointed to this committee when it was set up as part of that. But this is also going to be, you kind of have to put the definition out there. And then
Totally agree.
that's what then the community engagement part is, okay,
Well,
now tell us what that means. Now we can talk about it.
So, but even with that, even with CRT, the thing is that, people might think, oh, we're doing CRT, but we're focusing on Waunakee and our students here, right? I think that was the message that came out when we had that public forum.
Okay.
That, because it's Waunakee, we're not Madison, we're not everybody else. That doesn't necessarily mean things won't come up, but to have that basic understanding, and I see what Dave says, because sometimes people are using terminology
yeah,
wrong.
I totally agree.
All wrong. They're saying one thing, but it totally doesn't make any sense. But you want to be able to put it out so they understand like what we're saying, like when we're having a discussion, what we truly mean by it. That does, and I do understand we have to bridge that gap, but I think we also have to get down to that basic, okay, no, this is what this word means.
Yeah.
And how does that look here? It can look many ways, right? Because I think people might feel like things are being taken away from them, right? And we're not trying to take things away from anyone, right? We're trying to make sure everybody has the correct amount of resources, guidance, tools to be able to use, so everybody can take advantage of what the school district brings. So I think it is really important for terminology to go out, because I think if there's two pieces with that. Like I think in September when we have the conversation, like I think that's different. Then we can have that dialogue and try to
Totally agree.
come more together.
So unpacking it. too.
Yeah.
When you think of assumptions walls.
Yeah.
This is a definition we're working from.
Yeah.
Let's sit down and unpack it together. Where, these are different facets of definitions and we don't understand each other's, but this is the one we're working from.
Because when you talk about equality, everybody thinks equality is good,
Correct.
right? Yes, equality is good if everybody's on an equal plane, So it's just like, then you could explain, well, okay, well, what does that mean? How does everybody get to that equality or that space where everyone's growing together? But that also doesn't mean that someone could flourish and keep going further, right? So,
Yes.
So we're good there with the definitions? Okay, let's see. Okay, so updates on board actions and decisions that would be informational to the committee. Is there anything, Dave?
Really, the only thing that happened was vote to remove the rural.
Good.
And then saying that basically the branding process is gonna look at the rest of it.
Okay. Any responses or questions with that? Okay. You guys hear me online? Oh, good.
Something, Mike?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. All right. So discussion of the district response about national and local incidents. Right now, there's a lot of things going on. Does anyone have anything that they want to bring up to the committee that is troublesome or see that may impact us as a community?
Joel, I would just bring up that the board did vote last week, 6-1 to remove the mural in the gym. In case anyone didn't catch that, the board did eventually act on it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, Dave said that's what the decision was. Thank you, though. Okay, so future meetings, discussion of recommendations to the district to further equity for other issues, including building accessibility, audits of accessibility websites, discussion of district progress on the removal of Native American imagery. We already spoke about the imagery. But it's Mike, you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you want to speak about any of these things?
I don't particularly have to. I mean, these were all things that we discussed when we had the in-person meeting, when we went over the audit a few weeks ago. Just that if anybody had ideas for future meetings, that these would be ones to discuss. These are ones that I think we've always kind of had just sitting in the background of, we could just have a meeting on any one of these in particular. It doesn't matter to me when they're scheduled, but I think they are conversations that need to be had, particularly by this committee before it moves to the full board. They're all things that have been discussed at various points, because I only speaking for myself. I've been on committees in the past that discussed these things, but then never really did anything about them, particularly, well, obviously A, and then B being something we've just mentioned in the past as being an issue with no action on it, and then C, well, we've got our master of curriculum sitting right next to you there anyway. So when this was even being formed, one of the discussions I had with Tim was, we could have a meeting simply on this where there's a presentation and we can ask questions of the people who know the answers. We just haven't scheduled that yet. So these were some ideas for future meetings. I don't think we need to set them today, but it's put out there just so it's on the agenda so we can discuss it. Okay,
thanks, Mike. So I also feel like for the recommendations, two of these things that are important is B and C. Obviously, when we're talking about hiring practices, and which our tool actually addresses that as well. I think those, when we start talking about recommendations, it'd be nice to have, HR, the head of HR here, just to be able to have a conversation about what that looks like, what's the process, how they recruit. I know Tim was, what is it, weekend, you said? But using other avenues to be able to get other staff. And then the discussion of curriculum. Obviously, we have our expert here. And then, mentioning that too, because I feel like even with the report that we're going to put out, we do want to have that out there and talk about that as well.
So can I ask, are these topics seen as being distinct from the recommendations that we're putting forward? Because it sounds to me like some are viewing this, what's being written, as like a summary of the audit, and some are viewing it more holistically as our recommendations. I mean, Joel just spoke to the fact that some of these things, and I would argue all of these things, really fit within categories within the audit. So I'm just wondering, are we pulling these ideas out for future meetings just with the intent of specifically having dialogue on this committee about them? Or I would think that these are things that we want to make recommendations.
Yeah, so my thought was, that's why I wanted to have the next meeting that we had, because I feel like when we're doing recommendations, just say our committee just ends up getting resolved, right? This stuff needs to get out, right? So I feel like, if we're not saying that these are like, especially hiring practices, right? I think that's really important, but we really need to know what that process is. And I know it was there, but I guess I would have to see it pulled out of there. And say, okay, we're starting to talk about hiring practices. On the audit tool, this is what it said, or this is where it's going to be. So I guess for me, I'm more of the holistic viewer of this. I feel like there's areas that we could be focusing more on, but that's not really the focus right now. I think we just have to look at it as a group of what we think, move in that direction, and then we're just going to keep adding to that. So that's just my thought on that. So yes, to answer your question, more than just discussing it, but then also recommending it.
So these are things that people, if they don't feel that they were explicitly highlighted in the top 10, you could have it as another consideration.
Yeah, and just say,
have a recommendation.
yeah, it's not taken away from this. It's just adding to, oh no, if we talk as a group and we start talking about that, we see that there's an area that everyone's like, yeah,
Right.
I would add.
Okay.
It's not gonna hurt. Any other comments on that? Mike?
Yeah, the only capstone on that, Joel, is I don't want the audit to stand entirely by itself without discussing some more things directly. And I know that may sometimes be challenging because it can be critical of the district or the community at times. I just don't want us to necessarily put out an audit that, I will be honest, from like a layperson's perspective, when we use a lot of terminology that educators might be used to using, it almost comes across as somewhat esoteric at times and it's inaccessible. So that's why getting to some of these specific recommendations, and maybe we can do that through the audit. I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about them directly. That's all.
Thank you. And I think we can do that with our next meeting as well. I don't think that's gonna be, now, I'm not making it simple, but I'm saying we can have a discussion about it, talk about it, and then recommend it, and then we can, you know, move on from there. Because again, these are all just starting places to go. Does anybody have any other comments regarding the agenda at all? Melanie, do you have anything? Mike, you guys good? Both mics? Okay. And Rebecca, do you need anything for us in terms of timetable?
No, you guys have laid out your timetable pretty accurately. I will have to release this agenda Friday. So, but we can leave it, I mean, the final document doesn't have to be put in there. Just put discussion on.
Okay, perfect. All right, look at that, 7:32. I second that. All in favor? All opposed?
Look what we got done in 90 minutes.
I know, that was.
Yeah, we